getting out of an abusive relationship early makes a huge difference.
And I'm proud to say I did come in as a victim, but I am a survivor.
Then I could see my mom. My mom was walking toward us. And I got excited. And I was like, there's my mom. And then he didn't stop.
I'm trying to keep it together, I said. I gave in to the tears. And I hated that.
It's not necessarily the easiest process. It's not necessarily the prettiest process, but it is the most effective process. Like, you can do this. I'm going to tell you 100% you can do this, and you're so worth it to do this.
I'm sure losing any child is a real arrow through your heart, but you know, she was great. She was a friend and a family member and our daughter.
There is one thing stronger in me than fear, and that's my determination.
And now, here's your host, Jen Lee.
It's time to introduce a very special guest, Brevard County's Sheriff Wayne Ivey. He is here to share information, answer questions, and allow the listeners of I Need Blue to hear firsthand from our sheriff. Sheriffs hold an elected position and are responsible for maintaining law and order and enforcing the law. Sheriffs are accountable directly to the citizens of their county, the Constitution of their state, and ultimately the United States Constitution. I did research on Sheriff Ivey, and I must say his contributions are vast on a local, national, and international level. He has been recognized twice during his career by the International Association of Chiefs of Police for his innovation and partnership approach to fighting crime. He is a product of Green Cove Springs, Florida. His wife, Susan, was born and raised in Titusville, Florida. He began his law enforcement career with Putnam County Sheriff's Office and Clay County Sheriff's Office. Once he began working for the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, he worked in all 67 counties, including the Brevard Field Office around June of 2007. He was elected sheriff in 2012, almost a decade ago. Sheriff Ivey, and like all sheriffs and our law enforcement, are part of our community. They are our neighbor, a friend, a family member, and we are thankful for you. With great pleasure, I would like to introduce to you Brevard County's Sheriff Wayne Ivey.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you for having me today. And, you know, I was listening to how the show started and everything, and I think people lose sight a lot of times of the victim. You know, the victim is the one that has been impacted the most by the crime that has occurred. And regardless of what that crime is, it changes people's lives. It impacts them in not only emotionally, but in their thoughts of feeling safe. It can be something as deep as a violent crime or something as identity theft that victimizes you and completely changes your life. You know, I'm very, very fortunate in our agency. We have our victims advocate team that works closely with our victims of crime. The state attorney's office does a great job in their victims advocate outreach. It is one of those things that so much focus gets put on the suspect. You know, even law enforcement, when they're making the arrest and stuff, oftentimes the victim is not thought of in that capacity. But our team does a great job in making sure we stay in touch with the victim, making sure that we get them the resources they need, and helping them through this process, the criminal justice process.
I'm hoping to really bring some awareness to what happens to victims, not just the suspect.
My wife used to work in the banking industry, and she was victim of several armed robberies at the banks. And she and I met when I was investigating a bank robbery in Titusville. We did not realize that we met until years later when we went out on our first date and we started talking about her experiences in the banking industry, mine, and we connected those two things. But, you know, hearing her talk about how that impacted her, having people come in and jump up on the counter and point guns in your face and threaten, you know, just violence to you. Some of her coworkers never came back. That was their last day of work because they could not emotionally handle anymore, and understandably so. Whether it's an armed robbery at a bank or you're the victim of identity theft, there's a mark out there that says the average victim of a true identity theft comprehensive takeover, where they totally steal your identity, get jobs in your name, buy homes in your name, whatever it is they're doing, will spend up to 400 hours of their life trying to get back to where they were. Now put that on steroids with a violent crime, something that does physical harm or makes you constantly feel unsafe everywhere you go from that point forward. You used a couple words a little while ago that really goes into playing an important role in how we address victimization, how we address protecting ourselves. And you used the term, what if? You know, we spend most of our lives asking ourselves, what if? What if I got fired? What if I got a new job? What if I bought a new car? What if? We never pause to say, what if this happens to me? What if I'm at a gas station and somebody comes up to try and rob me? What if somebody's breaking into my home? And so what if becomes very important in how we prevent crime and how we deal with the aftermath of crime as well. You know, we're very blessed. In Brevard County, our citizens love us. You know, you see what's taking place across the rest of the country. You feel horrible for the law enforcement officers that are having to work in communities and for managers and elected leaders that don't appreciate what they do. You look at us, we have just the opposite. We have elected leaders that support everything we do. We have a community that loves us, that trusts us, that protects us just as much as we love, trust, and protect them. My deputies tell me that they can barely pay for their meal anymore in a restaurant because either the restaurant has told them their meal is taken care of, or in most cases, an anonymous citizen has gone. And the term "I need blue" is recognized so well here in our community. When, you know, there's talks of, you can't even say it's talks, it's insanity of defund the police. Now the big push is defame the police. And what they're ultimately going to do is, and you're seeing it happen. I just saw yesterday in Asheville where 40% of their law enforcement officers have left because they defunded the police department. You're seeing these areas that are defunding and not supporting their law enforcement officers. They're not going to be able to recruit law enforcement. You'll see two different things happen. The first thing is because they can't recruit good quality, best of the best people, they'll lower their standards of employment. And when you recruit mediocre, the absolute best you're ever going to get is mediocrity. Yeah. We recruit the best of the best, and if our person's having a bad day, we're still getting above average. When you recruit mediocre, that's the best you're going to get. Mistake number two is they won't even be able to fill their spots then, and law and order will be gone in those areas. We're fortunate. We have, again, a state attorney that puts bad people away when we take them to them. We have a state attorney that understands we're out here working hard every day to make good, strong cases to give them the teeth they need. And then we have a community that rallies behind us. That's the blessing for us in law enforcement here in Brevard County.
And I am truly thankful to be here. There are a lot of people who say, I want to do something for our law enforcement, but I don't know what to do. Mm-hmm.
Some of the things that we see, the absolute greatest thing you can do is just walk up and say thank you or I appreciate you. And we get that on a absolute constant basis, and you never get tired of it. It feels just as good the 10th time as it did the first time to have one of your citizens that you're out there protecting walk up and tell you thank you. But some of the examples of things we've had, one of our deputies told me about a lady that he was pumping gas in his cruiser, and lady stopped and said, "Pump your gas, I've got your back." And she stood on sentry while he was pumping his gas to make sure that nobody came up behind him and stuff. The paying for the meals, a lot of people will bring donuts to the precincts. We call them power rings now. It sounds so much more nutritious. And the eclairs are power sticks or power bars. You can frame those either way you want. We had a little girl that made cupcakes for deputies, and just randomly, as she would see a deputy, she was giving them cupcakes. We have such a great community. Our crime rates dropped 47% in the last 8 years here in Brevard County. People are moving from these other areas where law and order is not in check. They're moving from these other areas where education is not in check, and they're coming here to Brevard County.
There is a lot of people moving here. How do you make them feel confident that the riots and the violence are not going to as well?
Sure. So I think what's been our best play there is we make it very well known. I make no apologies that we target criminals. If you're a criminal, you came here to commit violence, you came here to steal, you came here to do drugs, you came here to harm a puppy. Whatever it is, we are going to put your butt in jail. We invite anyone to peacefully protest. You can stand out there and peacefully protest about whatever your passion is, but you pick up a brick and you're going to jail. I think you have to prevent actions like that in a day-to-day activity. You can't wait for the emergency to happen and then say, we're tough on crime. You have to lay down that mantra across the board every day, making sure that everyone, your citizens and those that may appear upon your community, know you have zero tolerance for crime. And that's the key. If you go back and you look at where things started to fall apart for Seattle and Portland and these other areas that are being impacted, New York and everywhere else, you go back and start tracking that, put it on a timeline. What you'll see, they had tolerance for crime. And crime will rise to any level a community will tolerate. If you say, we're no longer going to enforce this crime because it's a petty crime, well, you just rose a notch. If you say, we're going to, let this one be okay. I mean, you look at Seattle, they actually have, even though meth and everything else, fentanyl is against the law, you can go there. It's a safe zone where you can do drugs. And to make sure you're okay, they have fire rescue people staged there to deploy Narcan should you overdose. You're tolerating crime. From the very moment I became sheriff, our agency has made it very clear. We target criminals and we have zero tolerance for crime. So the reassurance to our citizens is that we're never going to back down from that. When I became sheriff, I call it the 3 C's. I protect our citizens, our cops, and our Constitution. And a lot of places have forgotten that. They've turned a blind eye to it. And you're seeing massive departures of law enforcement officers. New York had 5,700 law enforcement officers retire in a 6-month period. You can't make that up. No. Not in today's recruitment world. You can't make that up. So you're seeing a city that is slowly degrading into tolerating crime. Homelessness. It's a very slippery slope when you're trying to address homelessness. Obviously, our first concerns as law enforcement officers and as humans is the compassion for those that find themselves in that situation. Years ago, homelessness was, you envisioned it as someone standing on the side of the road holding a sign saying, we'll work for food or hungry. Today, there's a homeless family standing on the side of the road, or they're sleeping in a station wagon, or the family's lost their home and they're sleeping in a tent, and mom spends all of her time trying to help the kids get ready for school, and they're taking out a membership at a local gym so they have a place to go take a bath. So homelessness has a completely different picture and view today than it did 20 years ago. When you're addressing homelessness, you have to make sure you're taking a multi-dimensioned approach, if you will. And how do we get those that are homeless that want help? Keyword. How do we get them into transitional housing? How do we get them back into a stable environment, stable life, get them a job, get them back, in the resources they need? That's one approach. The other approach is making sure that you're not creating an environment that is so inviting that you see what places like Seattle and Los Angeles and New York are now starting to see, where they're taking over the streets. The third part of that is you never lose sight of the fact that your good law-abiding citizens, your store owners, your business owners, deserve your protection, and not just your protection against them being the victim of crime, your protection against their business being destroyed, their business being inhibited to the point where they can't function, they can't do the things they do. So it's obviously a multi-dimensional approach you have to take. We have some great organizations that work with us on the homeless initiatives, U.S. Veterans for Homeless Support, Family Promise of Brevard, the Veterans Memorial Center and team. So we partner with them to make sure we're finding that balance. You're seeing an initiative right now that Melbourne Mayor is pretty much taking under his wing to clear out all the encampments. Bravo to him and the team for doing it. Those camps breed drug infestation, they breed crime, they go and steal from the surrounding neighborhoods to support their habits and their lifestyle. So, bravo to him.
Let's talk about the media.
Okay.
How has the media affected the perception of our law enforcement the past year? Sure.
So the first thing I would say to that is 99.9% of the media get up every day and go to work and just report. They don't have an agenda. They do it with passion in their heart, just like 99.9% of law enforcement officers do it right every day. To frame all of the media into one bad apple is not fair. It's not. Conversely, you have that other small percentage that does everything they can to stir hate, to break a story that's not even really a story, but they think it might. I call it clickbait.
Oh, yes.
To some of the media that doesn't like me, I become clickbait. How many times can they get somebody to click on an article so they can sell and say, oh, look how many times, people look at our stuff. That's unfortunate. And it's sad that all the great things law enforcement does today will be no different. Law enforcement officers throughout Brevard County, whether they're wearing a green uniform like ours, a blue uniform like our police departments, a black uniform like Melbourne Police Department, throughout the day, lives will be saved.
Yes.
Kids will be greeted and played football with out in the yard. Somebody will be stopped from being a victim throughout the day. But there's never reporting of that. You don't see it. In fact, we started a program through our community outreach, through our social media, and we're very blessed. We have a tremendous following of about 368,000 people that follow us on Facebook. We started a show called The Good Stuff, where I highlight the little things that these deputies do each and every day to show, the citizens. It's not the bad stuff you see. So when you look at what some of the media has done, and especially the agenda-driven media that has a big picture look at, we're going to defame the police, or, we're going to defame this elected leader, or we're going to defame this company, or whatever it is. They have an agenda. That's sad. I don't know how they look themselves in the mirror. I think they're starting to get the message that the negative talk about law enforcement is having a counter effect. People are turning the news off now. One of the things that I've done with our community outreach and our social media is citizens get to hear it directly from me. What I actually said, what I actually think, and what I actually feel. I think they deserve that from their elected leaders. They may not like what I said, but they at least get to hear me say it, and they get the absolute true version of it. This profession is much bigger than that. This profession is much stronger than that. And as you're seeing from citizens aren't going to tolerate it. They'll put up with a lot of stuff. But when you start targeting their peacemakers, they're going to stand up. And that's what our community's done.
I am one voice at this point. It starts with one voice.
It starts with one voice, just like one vote. You're not one voice because the things that you're doing in this podcast will reach out to, thousands and thousands, and they'll share it, and they'll have that understanding of what victimization is really like. In this episode, what law enforcement's really like, what our deputies and officers face out there. I think you have to lump into that as well, or group into that, I should say, our school teachers, our firefighters. Those are people that are doing the job because they love it. They're not getting rich. Most firefighters have a second job. They run a landscaping business, something else to take care of their family. School teachers clearly are not getting rich in their job. They're doing it because they love it. And man, I feel bad for our school teachers. When I was a kid growing up, my parents were best friends with my teacher. The teacher called home and said, Wayne Ivey did wrong. I did wrong. There wasn't a debate. It wasn't the teachers picking on me. It was the teacher felt the need to call us, and you were in trouble. And I can tell you at our household, it was a butt whipping what followed. And then an apology to the teacher for it. So that was the kind of upbringing, but the game has changed for it.
Absolutely. Even when I was a child, I went to a Catholic school. Things were very different. You stared at the teacher to show respect, and you raised your hand, and you had manners. And like you said, if my parents got a phone call, I was in trouble.
Oh, you were in trouble. That's right. Yeah.
You had to write a sentence 50 times consecutively numbered.
That's right. I had a third grade school teacher. It's funny how something as far back, I'm 59 now, and my third grade school teacher, I still remember lessons that Miss Williams taught me. And she whacked me on the back of the hand one day with a ruler. My family didn't sue. They didn't run down there. Why'd you hit my son? They pretty much knew I did something to deserve it.
Growing up, there was such respect for the police officers, for the firemen. In fact, I was taught in first grade, whenever we heard sirens, police sirens, fire, you stopped what you were doing and you said a prayer for the police officers, for the person involved in the accident, and for their families. That's because it affects a whole bunch of people.
Yeah. I will tell you this. If I had to put my finger on where I think this country started to decline in values of respect, character, all of those things, it's when parents became scared, feared more of hearing a knock on the door from DCF than they did of hearing a knock on the door from law enforcement telling them their kid was in trouble. Society, sometime back, started to rob parents of their ability to be parents. It started to take it from it, as I tell everyone, and my mom gets so mad when she hears me say this. So make sure my mom's not allowed to listen to this podcast. My mom was the sheriff, the judge, and the executioner in our household. And my father was her backup and her witness to what happened. Mom didn't play. My mom ran our family with an iron fist. She had the support of my father. Even years later, when my mom and dad got a divorce, they divorced their marriage, not their parenting.
Yes.
They were in sync in all of it. I wasn't worried about the sheriff in Green Cove Springs, Florida. Didn't even know who he was. I was worried about Mama.
Yeah.
And we've lost that. Mama no longer has the all-out authority anymore. Mom has to worry about being in trouble because of the way society has structured things. And what we always tell everybody here is, if you discipline your kid from a reasonable approach, if you take reasonable actions in disciplining your child, we're not coming to arrest you. We're coming to high-five you.
Right.
Because you're helping us. You're helping us not have to deal with that kid later. I think America has to get back to letting parents be the chief law enforcement officer in their child's life, not me, not the chief of police, but mom and dad need to be the chief law enforcement officer. We need to get back to being the country that was founded on faith. Get prayers. I was so proud of our governor. Just created a moment of silence in our schools now. We're headed back in the right direction.
When I saw prayers being taken out of schools and things like that, it fundamentally affects things.
Absolutely. It really does. And I think, too, what we're seeing right now is what I call the first generation of everybody gets a trophy. You don't have to work harder than anybody else anymore. Really, you don't have to work hard. You just have to show up is the kind of the philosophy that's out there now. Before, you had to work hard.
Yes.
Jim Valvano, the coach of NC State, said one time, it's not if you work hard, you'll be successful. It's if you don't work hard, you can't be successful. And that's a very profound statement. We've lost that. All we do now is just show up.
There's a sense of pride in challenging yourself. And it didn't matter if I worked 40, 50, 60 hours a week. You were going to do what you had to do.
That's right.
To survive and provide.
And you always have in your mind, it will get better. Mm-hmm. I'm going to work myself out of this particular situation I'm in, and it will get better. And I'm going to make it better. Yeah, we got to get back there some way.
Yeah. I told my parents, I said, I didn't always have what I wanted growing up, but I always had what I needed.
Man, so it's so funny you say that, because the way that I build my budget, and people have heard me say this many times before, is I look at my wants and my needs. And it's so funny to hear you say it, because the example I always give is, I want a Rolex, but I need a watch. That's how we run our family income. That's how we run our budget at the sheriff's office. We get what our team absolutely needs. And then if there's a way, we get what they want to do it. And those are distinctly different items, your wants and your needs. So
I think we've shifted a little.
We've shifted to, we're going to give you what will make you happy. You can't make somebody happy. They have to make themselves happy.
Mm-hmm. My boys are grown, and they're both Marines, and so we got through.
Thank them for their service.
I will. We got through life, teenage years very well. But when they were little boys, they loved to dress up as firemen and police officers. Now, as a mom...
A little disappointing about the fireman thing, but that's all right. So,
but those boots were great. They didn't have laces.
I think that was Mom. I don't think that was...
Yeah, that was me. I was like, a fireman? All right, here you go. You want the yellow boots or the red boots? Take your pick. But a child today that comes to you and says, you know what? I want to be a police officer. I want to be in law enforcement. What would you tell them?
Absolutely go for it. This is, and nothing against any other profession, certainly nothing against our educators or our firefighters or anything of that nature. But being a law enforcement officer is the greatest job on the planet. Even in what we see happening in society today, to come into this job knowing that there are those out there, that a very small percentage, by the way, a very small percentage of what I call vocal ankle biters that just like to make noise. This is the greatest job on the planet. It's the most rewarding job on the planet. It's one of those jobs where in one moment, in one day, in one shift, you can change and impact 20 people's lives. There's nothing else out there that gives you that opportunity. In one day, you may have to arrest somebody, and the way you do it professionally and the way you handle it and the way you not only take them to jail, but get them some additional resources changes their life. Maybe the day you respond to a car wreck and apply a tourniquet that saves somebody's life. It may be the day you find a bunch of ducklings in a storm sewer and you pull them out and save their lives. In one day, you will have that opportunity in every shift you go on. I have 2 sons that are law enforcement officers. I stopped and had dinner with my son, and he had his daughter there, and she's 6, and she wants to be a police officer. He's a state trooper. My son is. My youngest boy is a deputy for Seminole County. I watch the joy they have in their job. Is it frustrating when you're standing outside in 100-degree weather directing traffic for 3 hours? Do you wonder if maybe you should have went into some other business? Of course you do. But when you sit down in your car after just pulling somebody out of a burning car, you're glad you picked that career. So, absolutely, man, go for it. But I will tell you, this is the greatest job on the planet. It really is.
And you said something that's really important that actually I said in one of my previous episodes where I told on myself. The first ticket I ever got was an illegal U-turn. On my way to a sales call, I'm directionally challenged. I get lost going in a straight line, right? So I saw the do not make an illegal U-turn, and I did, and I got pulled over. But one thing that I said in my podcast episode is that, sometimes the police officer is protecting us, but they're also protecting others.
That's right.
And we forget about that because we're so focused on, oh my God, I got a ticket, da-da-da-da. But no, honestly, somebody was making a right-hand turn as well as I was doing my illegal U-turn. There was no accident, but there could have been.
Right.
And I learned my lesson.
Well, I got to be honest with you. I noticed one thing I picked up on is the first ticket you got. So, that was the first thing that caught my eye was, so we've had more. But you're right. We try and address issues as they need addressing. Something that's very egregious and that type of thing. Obviously, there's a penalty for that. Sometimes you can pull somebody over and have the same effect by showing them some examples of things that they could have caused. I stop people all the time on 95. It's a racetrack out there. And, I tell them, listen, I'm the sheriff. When the sheriff has to stop you, you're driving pretty badly. I always tell them, you're not going to get to where you're going safely, and you're going to harm somebody along the way. Right. And your family's going to be hurt, and their family's going to be hurt. And there are other people that are mad from the minute you pull them over, and, it is what it is. We deal with the demeanor that we get when we approach the car. Traffic stops are some of the most dangerous things that our law enforcement officers do out there. It's also one of the most important things they do.
And what I will say is that I try to play sheriff in the vehicle when I'm driving with my husband and tell him he's driving too fast, but he just doesn't quite believe me or see my badge or something. So do you have a suggestion on how I can get him to slow down?
What I would say is, just let him do what he wants, and I didn't know it was playing sheriff. I just thought it was because my wife does the same thing. She just tells me you're doing this and you're doing that. The worst mistake I ever made was we have a program called the Teen Driver Challenge. Kids that have their learner's permit go through this, and they learn everything in this. Worst mistake I ever made was sending our 2 youngest ones went to that and benefited from it. It was the worst mistake I ever made because they would be in the car with me after having attended that, and they'd be like, you're not supposed to be doing this. And I'm like, okay, I'm never sending anybody else to that program. Go to brevardsheriff.com and check out the Teen Driver Challenge. It's completely free.
Do you think if they were able to experience even a couple of hours sitting in court, as people are brought in and they plead guilty or not guilty and either get taken away to jail for 10 days or whatever, or maybe do a ride along, do you think that might bring a little reality to a teenager's thought process of, okay, this is real. This is not what we see on TV.
Going to court is an eye-opening experience from a lot of different aspects. One, you get to see the harshness, the reality of people losing their freedoms, people, being sentenced to prison sentences and time in jail or probation, whatever it is. But it's a great learning experience because you also get to see how the criminal justice system works. You get to see the scales of justice at work. You get to see that I believe America has the greatest criminal justice system in the world, fairest, the most balanced. But you also have to be a little careful. I'll use scared straight as an example, and I go back to taking a multi-pronged approach. Anytime you take a single-dimensioned approach to something, you won't be successful. The Scared Straight program, I'm not a fan of Scared Straight. Scared Straight did one thing, scared the kid. And once they got past the fear, there was nothing to stop them. We have a program called Brevard Attitude Modification, BAM. It's designed to be a little flick on the head to the kid. I tell parents, I don't want the judge to sentence your child to this because then they're already in trouble. I want you to sentence them to it so that we can keep them from getting in trouble. The BAM program is completely free to our citizens. It's 10-year-old to 17-year-olds, and we split it between male and female attendees. And it's a great program. In that program, what they get is they get the court experience. In fact, that's how it starts. It starts that morning with the judge sentencing them to a 12-hour day in the BAM facility. They get the process experience. They're booked into the BAM facility. They have to change into their inmate clothing. They have to make their bunks. In that process, they get to meet our team that is kind of a boot camp type approach. Then they go in and they meet the chain gang. And the chain gang doesn't do what Scared Straight does. The chain gang doesn't come in and yell at them and threaten them and bully them. Chain gang actually sits down with them and has a good comforting talk about, you don't want to be here. This is not the place you want to be. And they have a candid approach. And, it's funny, when we were designing BAM, I tell our team, I don't want you to think outside the box. I want you to think outside the warehouse where the box is at, because that's where we get the real good stuff. And so one of the things we did was we brought the chain gang in, asked them to help us design the BAM program. And my initial vision was for the chain gang to get in here, get your bunk made, that type of approach. And the chain gang talked me out of it and said, Sheriff, we think this will be a better approach. And so, who better to listen to than them? We put you through that. You take a tour of the jail. You eat jail food, which for me would do it. You make me eat one of those meals out of the jail, I'm never committing crime ever in my life. They go on a tour of the morgue to see what death really looks like. Mm-hmm. And then when they come back, we ask them, are you ready to make good decisions? In fact, there's two big giant arrows on the floor. One says bad decisions, one says good decisions. We stand in the middle of it and we say, are you ready? And they say, I'm going to make good decisions in my life. Then we take them into a completely different environment. It's a bright environment where we teach them how to do a resume, where we teach them about picking the right friends, where we teach them about dress. We actually have some local businesses that will give them a job if they're old enough. No questions asked. They want to get them in the work fields, get them in the force. And what we try to do is show them what happens when you make bad choices and what happens when you make good choices. So we take that multi-dimensioned approach to it, not just giving them the scared part, but giving them the celebrating part as well.
That's great. I'm so glad you had the opportunity to mention that program.
Oh, it's an amazing program. Yeah. So if you want to learn more about it, again, go to brevardsheriff.com. Look for Brevard Attitude Modification.
Absolutely. I have one last question for you.
Every time you say you have kids, I worry that you're going to ask me to take them. And I'm not doing that. I've done my time there. So.
No, one is out of the country. But if you could get him back here so I could visit, by all means, you're on it.
Well, when he gets through with his time serving our country, tell him to come serve our community. I'll hire him as a deputy, him or her.
Oh, so. Absolutely. He loves it. Both my boys love it. So I'm so proud of them, and to hear what they have gone through is amazing. Yeah. Absolutely. I have one last question for you.
Every time you say you have kids, I worry that you're going to ask me to take them. And I'm not doing that. I've done my time there. So.
No, one is out of the country. But if you could get him back here so I could visit, by all means, you're on it.
Well, when he gets through with his time serving our country, tell him to come serve our community. I'll hire him as a deputy, him or her.
Oh, so. Absolutely. He loves it. Both my boys love it. So I'm so proud of them, and to hear what they have gone through is amazing. Yeah. My husband is Chinese. Mm-hmm. And so there is heightened awareness of crime in the Black, Brown, Jewish, Asian communities.
Right.
If my husband were to walk up to you on the street and say, you know what, I don't really feel safe, what would you say to him?
I would tell him all the great things about our community and, how we work so hard to make everybody safe, to make sure that everyone knows we're a community that not only puts our citizens at first and making sure they're safe, we do the same thing with our animals. We take that deep dive into everyone deserves to be safe, whether they're homeless, whether they live in a mansion, and everywhere in between, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of life experience, anything else. The fundamental key to happiness is feeling safe. It really is. And so, we talk to them about the different things that we do to make sure that everyone feels safe and the balance that we go through. I would talk about the diversity of our community. If you go back, in the past year and look at everything we've gone through, from COVID to the protests and riots, associated with the defund the police and everything else aspect. If you look at how Brevard County responded to each one of those crises, we were a model for other communities. We really were. We had candlelight vigils. We had forums to talk about things. We had a response plan to COVID. I mean, even go back before when the presidential debates and everything else were going on. People were protesting for one candidate or another. All we did as law enforcement is we made sure everybody was safe. We didn't get into the weeds of who you're supporting, who you're not supporting. You do your thing over there. They're going to do their thing over here. And we're going to be the thin green line between, a little bit of chaos, if you will. I would just remind him of all those things. And then I would probably ask him the biggest question of all of it. Why did you pick Brevard County to live in?
Yeah.
And if you look at that from a backwards answer, it's because he knew he was safe.
Absolutely. And my husband does feel safe,
Sure
just for the record. So before I wrap up, is there anything else you would like to tell our listeners and the citizens of Brevard County?
Just thank you. I mean, we've talked about it a lot. We've hit on how incredible this community treats its law enforcement officers. But I don't think our citizens realize the magnitude of what that means to our team. I don't know that they truly understand how much that means to each of our team members to have someone show them how much they're appreciated. In any walk of life, being appreciated is one of the things we strive for. In any walk of life, being appreciated is one of the things that makes you thankful you picked the career you did, or thankful you picked the spouse you did, or thankful you picked, the team you did, whatever it is, knowing that you're appreciated is it. And then the last part is where the success we're having in lowering our crime rate. As I said, we've lowered it by 47% in the past 8 years. That success is directly attributable to the partnership we have with our citizens. We're an agency of 1,700 people, but when you consider the partnership we have with our citizens, that's a force multiplier of 600,000. And so we have 600,000 people right here that come from all different walks of life, all different dynamics, all different political beliefs and religious beliefs and everything else, that all have the common mission of making sure Brevard County is the great place it is.
I want to thank you so much for being here today, answering questions of mine, and I know citizens of our county have similar questions as well. I'm going to use one of your quotes. It takes a community to protect a community.
Thank you, Jen. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening to I Need Blue. This is Jen Lee, joined by Sheriff Wayne Ivey. Visit www.ineedblue.net, subscribe, and you can find all of our episodes on there as well as your other favorite podcast platforms such as Spotify, Apple, Pandora.